It had been all too mundane and familiar Monday to Saturday at my dad's pizzeria, where for my first 6-day week I'd finally been promoted, or I guess forced into another position at this roach-filled joint. My dad had finally approved of me being a delivery driver instead of line cook, and at this point, anything that got me away from that stinky food storage room and more time within a 24-hour period outside of those walls was a win. I set out for my delivery after my dad dropped another nasty order of 2 triple cheese pizzas with a batch of our famous burnt breadsticks into my open hands, telling me his classic line of, "If the delivery takes longer than 45 minutes, it's out of your paycheck, sonny." He then continued on saying, "Also, it was a little squeaker sounding kid on the phone. So if they're a no-show, you better pay full price for your dinner." I quickly left and set the maps on my phone, heading out to the older side of town, where the homes range from worthless to priceless. As I arrived at the gates of the mansion, matching the address on my maps, the place looked abandoned. Vines growing from the beautiful sculptures at the front gate, and the gate itself being rusted and missing a few bolts. As I tried to sneak by, without even touching it, my shirt got stuck, and with a step forward, the gate came tumbling over on top of me, squishing my body. A little mouse scurried out, with a huge smile, like this was his perfectly orchestrated plan, letting out a whistle, triggering a countless amount of rodents to swarm me and my pizza, grabbing the boxes and smartly leaving the burnt breadsticks, perfectly balancing the pizza boxes on their backs, and scurrying back into the mansion, as the little mouse, who at this point I could tell was the ringleader, pulled a stack of hundreds out of his back. "Cheers for the chings," he squeaked, putting a single 100 in my mouth and letting out another whistle as I felt the gate get lifted off my back. I sprinted to my car as soon as the gate lifted off my final limb, putting the pedal to the metal back to my dad's pizza shop. But by the time I arrived, the place was abandoned, with a single note on the door reading "closed due to rat infestation." It was a dark and stormy night, just perfect for my first pizza delivery shift at this new job I'd found online. I collected the order from the line cooks and tossed on my jacket that was already soaked from my previous deliveries that night. Luckily, this would be the last one before doing it all again tomorrow. I took off towards the location, not worrying about traffic cameras because I'd borrowed the company's car for the week, which I might have used for some personal errands as well. I got to a one-way gravel road that seemed to go on forever, even past the perimeter, but my maps persisted. I was headed in the right direction. I arrived at what seemed like an old townhouse in the middle of a literal nowhere, with mannequins set up in the front yard dressed in 1800s attire, set up to represent some sort of old town. I parked and put one foot in front of the other towards the front door, shivering in the cold rain and partially in fear because of the eeriness of how precise someone had set this up. I knocked on the door, only to have it instantly swing open to reveal a tiny 5-foot gray-eyed man, looking older than the time he had his yard set in. He pointed towards a dimly lit table where I could make out a stack of cash. "Leave the pizza and takes what's there?" I asked. "All of it," he replied. As I grabbed the cash, I looked around the room and saw the setup he had in his yard as a diorama on the table next to the one where I left the pizzas. But the difference was the miniature version on the table was alive. Before I could turn around to hightail it out of there, I felt a hand on my back as the man made his way around me and whispered, "Before they were mannequins, they were just like you." At this point, I was no longer cold, just shivering in fear. I looked at his face, slowly turning doll-like. I snapped back into reality, running through the front door, starting the car and pulling the quickest U-turn of my life, driving the other way back down the gravel road. As I looked out my rear view, I saw every last mannequin, big and small, standing on the road, waving me goodbye and blowing kisses. I was just about done my shift at my local pizza shop I was unlucky enough to work at. 5 minutes before closing, the phone rang, and my money-hungry manager, of course, answered the call, dropping an old-style map with a red X marked in the middle of the woods. "Little off those electronics maps you've been using there, buddy," he said, with a crooked, cockroach-filled smile. I hopped in the car and headed out into the wood-filled area, finally finding myself on a dirt road with no end in sight. I got far enough past the last stop sign on the paper map my manager handed to me, directly in line with where the X was within the wooded area. I got out of the car, taking the 2 lukewarm pies with me, and started walking in a straight line towards the X location on the map. I finally came across a horror movie-style cabin right in the middle of the woods, like a UFO had perfectly cut a circle in the tree line, placing the cabin there. The yard was kept up okay, a seesaw and flower garden, pretty visible under the bright LED light that hit me like a flashbang when first detecting my motion. I rang the doorbell, being met with a little boy no older than 4. "Hello, I need help," he said. "Please come in. My daddy isn't okay." I smelt something more suspicious than the ingredients my manager gets for half off, but how could I deny this little blue-eyed boy's request? As I followed him in, I was met by an endless-looking hallway, way farther than I could have imagined that single-story wood cabin ever going, when all of a sudden, the boy dropped to all 4s, running down the hall like a cub bear into one of the rooms. He then peeked his hands and now glowing red eyes over the side and pointed to me. That's when a ugly, drooling at the mouth, half-human, half-wolf dove out, slamming itself against the wall, and within a split second started charging at me. "Pies on the house!" I yelled as I ran down that same beeline that took me to this unholy place. Finally, getting back to my car, I slammed the door shut and took off as the werewolf-like creature slammed into the side, leaving one of its claws in my rear driver door, and attached to it, a clean, crisp $100 bill.